Do I hit continue? I guess.
Yep, you should be all set.
I'm set.
All right. This is Oliver Art Center's 20 questions. My name is Mercedes Michalowski. I'm the executive director, and I'm going to go right into question number 1. Will you please introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, Mercedes. Thanks for having me. Good to be with you. Anyway, my name is Hank Feeley. I'm an artist. I'm a painter, a sculptor, an author. Also, I've written a couple of books, and I teach. So I'm originally from Chicago, but we now live in Glen Arbor, half of the year, Glen Arbor, Michigan, and Vero Beach, Florida. I have a studio in Vero Beach, Florida, and a home there for the winter months. So that's me, Hank Feeley.
Wonderful. So question number 2, you mentioned that you work in a couple of different mediums. So what is your favorite medium to work in?
Well, the medium that really intrigues me is lead crystal, casting lead crystal, and bronze, but lead crystal especially because it's such a fragile and neat looking thing. And but I don't do so much today in Chicago. The foundry is in Chicago, so I'm not there so much. So paint. I'm a paint. Mainly everything I do now is paint, and I'd say 65% oil, maybe 15 acrylic, 10 pastel, 10 watercolor. So I do all kinds of paint, and but it's mainly recently is mainly oils.
Okay. So when did your interest in art begin?
Well, I started, as long as I can remember, my earliest memories, 3 or 4 years old, were that I had 2 cousins, girls, teenagers, and they would babysit me, and they would get me doing art, to keep me quiet or to occupy me. And it kind of started that way. They were good artists too. They became commercial artists later in their lives. So I was getting trained by people who knew what they were doing. And now, but my parents, my mother was an Irish immigrant. My father was in the FBI. So their idea was not, they didn't want their son to be an artist. That wasn't in the cards for them. So I didn't go to art school or anything like that. But I did have art shows. I lived in Cape Cod at the time, and I did watercolors, landscapes, seascapes, stuff like that. And I had some shows, and I was pretty good. But I just did it because I could, and wasn't any big deal. Well, my father died, life changed. I went in the Navy. I came out of the Navy, and I had to get a job. And I thought, well, maybe I can be an art director in an advertising agency because I got these watercolors. I'm very naive. So I started shopping around with watercolors, and they were going, what the, and then I heard at Leo Burnett Company that somebody quit down in the research department. They needed somebody. So I got the job, and it was paying like 3 times what a junior art director would get anyway. So by that, I wound up 30 years in the advertising business, doing business, not doing art. But I did my art on the side. And then when I got to be 53 years old, and I said, I want to go to art school and really learn something. And the School of the Art Institute is right in Chicago, one of the best in the world. So I went there, got my degree, took double major, art history, studio, and art history changed my life. Oops. Turn this off. There we go. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But anyway, art history changed my life. It changed my life. I never knew that, the world of creating, the world is striving for something new. I never knew that. And that changed my life and changed my art. So long story, but there we're done with that.
Fantastic. So kind of going along the same vein, who or what inspires you?
Well, sort of course, my wife and family, my friends and all that. But um, in terms of artists, would be probably the Chicago Images, who I know and I studied with. A great creative thing happened in Chicago at that time, the Harry Who and all that. And then, well, the artists that Bernard Heisig, Robert Barnes, Frank Stella, James Rosenquist, who kind of does a little like what I do. And so seeing their art and liking their art and trying to figure out their art, it really kind of inspired me. But beyond that, the inspiration comes from life, the life of the senses. It's images are all around us all the time. We see things, ads, things. They're coming at us like millions of times at once. And so you get these images, and I collect images. Anything that catches my eye, I have 14 boxes full of stuff. And these are physical images that I use. I use them in my art. But then there's the images of the mind, that you get from poetry, you get it from literature, and you make up things, like I think of E. Cummings or James Joyce. I don't even understand what they're saying, but it creates an image in the mind, and then you kind of like a Rorschach test, you start to bring it out. So that a lot of that is what I do and what inspires me.
Okay. So this is kind of one of our outside the box questions. If your artwork were to be classified as a musical genre, what genre would it be?
Yeah, genre. What a nice word. It's pretty sophisticated. I don't really think that way. I think in terms of a piece of music specific, or a specific artist, a musician. And I kind of think of Spike Jones. Spike Jones, who took a regular piece of music and then added horns and screaming in it and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I do. It's kind of like bringing stuff in. Or Pink Floyd did the same thing with babies crying, telephones ringing, became part of the music. John Cage, John Cage was kind of nuts. I mean, the guy made a piece of music called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, where a guy comes out on stage to play a piano and he doesn't play anything. For 4 minutes and 33 seconds, the only sound that's recorded is the sound of the audience, coughing, breathing, sneezing, and that became his music. I mean, so that kind of stuff inspires me. I love that kind of stuff, Anyway, nuts, right?
I think it's perfect. So could you give us a verbal snapshot of your current work?
Well, I kind of just did in a way, but yeah, it's Billy Collins, the poet laureate of the United States, said he did a review of my work, and he said Hank Feeley's work is at the intersection of Magritte and Marvel Comics. Well, that's anyway, maybe, but my work is collage of images that I have, and also mixed with doodles, the images of the mind, things like I put it all together, and I kind of put things together that weren't meant to be together or shouldn't be together or don't belong together. And I try to put them in a composition that's pleasing, at least to me, pleasing. I don't know about anybody else, but that's kind of the way it is.
Okay, perfect. So if you could use the shades and tones of just one color in your artwork for the next few years, do you have a favorite that you would use?
I cannot imagine spending 3 years. My work is all about color. And I couldn't do it. I'd have to give up painting for 3 years. I could draw, I could sculpt, I guess, but wouldn't know what to do. I can't do it.
That's kind of understandable. It seems to be that would be quite a handicap for lots of artists to do that.
You're right.
So what is your favorite tool in your art toolkit?
Yeah, the favorite tool is the most useful tool, and that's the paintbrush, brushes. it's kind of hard to say favorites, but that is certainly the top of the preference list in terms of tools that I use. And the question suggests that there are some tools that I don't like, but I can't say, I can't think of a tool that I don't like. There's preference. There's a hierarchy, of course. Maybe tool 102 in the preference list would be my mineral spirits dump can. It's not that I don't like it; it's necessary. I use it, but it's not. It's way down the list of usefulness in a way.
Right.
So it's not. I guess brushes, and there isn't anything I don't like.
Well, then we will skip the one after that. And what is the best piece of advice you've been given?
Um, don't let this one get away. And that was a friend of mine speaking about my future wife, and I didn't. And so we're happily married, and that's great. And so that was the best piece of advice. In terms of art, um, in terms of art, uh, I had a professor in art school at the School of the Art Institute, a woman painter, and I was at a point where I was going to, when I left the advertising business, I was going to start another company, and I also wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to continue on my art, and I couldn't figure out how I could do both. It was really a problem for me. So I asked her. I asked a lot of people, but I asked her, and she said something quite profound, quite simple, quite obvious in a way. She said, "Do what you like." Okay, well, do what you like. I mean, it's like something I would say to a kid, right? Do what you like. And then she paused and she said, "And you like to paint." So all of a sudden that clicked, and I forgot the business. And for the past 28 years, I've been artist.
Well, it sounds like it was a good piece of advice.
Yeah,
And how long have you been married on a side note?
55 years.
Wow. Well, congratulations. So do you prefer to work solo or in collaboration with others?
I'm a solo. I have collaborated. Certainly, when you're casting bronze or crystal, you're collaborating with people who are more technically expert at that than me. And I've done murals with other people. But when I get in the studio, I turn the music on really loud, and I whistle, and that combination really turns people off. A lot of people don't. When I was at the School of the Art Institute, I shared a studio with a woman, and God, she hated it. She would complain to the other people. I mean, it was like, so she finally got her own place and left me alone, and that was fine. But I mean, so I'm hard to live with.
Um, so another one of our outside the box. Which famous artist would make a good president of the United States?
Well, we already had one, Ronald Reagan, an actor, so uh, um, we can debate that. But anyway, yeah, the thing is, I'm somebody who has a vision, somebody who has the motivation and the skills to get the job done, which kind of limits a lot of artists, you know, aren't there. But I can think of a few, and one is going back all the way to Peter Paul Rubens. Rubens, not only a historically great artist, right, but he was also one of history's great diplomats. He was knighted by England and Spain. He was from the Netherlands, but he prevented 4 wars, 4 different wars by all of the diplomacy. He went from the Netherlands to France to Spain, and he prevented the wars. Now that guy could make a president. Uh, the other one I think is Walt Disney. Walt Disney, a cartoon artist who created one of the most important companies in the world, and but though, they're gone, so can't go to them. So I think today, who's alive today that could be a president? I think Reese Witherspoon. Reese Witherspoon. No, people, you can laugh. I mentioned that to somebody the other day, and they kind of laughed. No, she's one of the most influential women in the world, accomplished, Academy Award actress. She's a director. She formed her own production company, does many productions. She's formed a founder of a fund called the Children's Defense Fund, which takes care of people, kids around the world. In Afghanistan, they're right now in Afghanistan. This woman is accomplished. She's got her own, she started her own clothing company. Come on, this woman she looks like a doll, and looks very young, but she's good. So maybe her.
Well, I would go along with that for sure. So what is your favorite meal?
Well, I'm a hunter and a fisherman, so wild duck. Not everybody's favorite meal, I guess. Wild duck is my favorite meal. Game birds, fish. I like to catch them, cook them, and eat them. So, but wild duck, it's the best. Try it. You ought to try it. I could cook it for you.
That would be lovely. So what, well, I can see that you're in your studio. So what type of art or which artist hangs on the walls of your home?
Mostly mine. And I think that's probably true of most artists. They hang their own work. They like their own work. I like my own work. Anyway, but I have a pretty eclectic kuniyushi, which a Japanese woodblock from 1836 I have, which we love. It's a geisha. I've got a Rembrandt etching. I've got a Goya etching. June Leaf, who's still alive today. She was one of my teachers, one of the early abstract expressionist women back when it was all those guys, but she was one. And, so a lot of the Chicago images, people I know, Jim Nutt, Carl Worsom, Phil Hansen, Ray Yoshida, the late, great Ray Yoshida. So I've got a lot of these. Suzanne Coffey, Dan Gustin, who's the head of the figure department at the School of the Art Institute. Anyway, these are people that I know, a lot of them I know. So it's kind of all over the place, so it's good stuff.
Wonderful. So what bit of advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I would say try to have more humility and empathy. I was a hard ass in my youth and in my business. And I've learned the hard way. I tried for myself in my latter years to have more empathy for others. And it would have been a whole lot better if I had it earlier in my life. It would have changed my life, I think. But in terms of art, I would say study art history. If I had studied art history in my youth, my life would have been very different than it turned out to be. My career may have been completely different. I just didn't know. But that I would say study art history and know what happened, know what people did, sort of how you can build on the shoulders of those who came before, that kind of thing. Anyway, so that would be it. Yeah.
I think that's a good bit. So if you could time travel to make art for a week with everything you could need or want, what date or time period would you choose?
Well, I've already indicated, I think the 60s, the early 60s with the Harry Hu and the Chicago Imagists in Chicago had to be one of the most creative times in the history of art. Highly influenced by outsider artists who they discovered, these students who became the Harry Hu. And that would be the time. I know them. I studied under them. but I wasn't able to be part of them. I would love to have been part of that group. Yeah.
So is there anything that you have to have when you're making art? Conditions just right, or a specific paintbrush or something like that?
Well, it's conditioned. I have to have open-ended time.
Okay.
Open-ended time. No distractions, no timetables, no places I gotta be, this and that. And I get into the zone. You hear artists talking about the zone. It's a real thing. You get into the zone and you're going, and you've got like this phone that just rang. You can't deal with that. And my wife, I'll be in the studio not knowing what it is, 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't even know what time it is. My wife will call and say, "Where the hell are you?" So I mean, it's like, and so yeah, open-ended time. Open-ended time. That's it.
Okay.
That's the necessity.
Yeah. So is there a gallery or museum that you would love to have your work featured in? And if so, which one?
The I've got I love my galleries. I've got Aaron Packer in Chicago and First Street Gallery in New York, and they're really great people. They do a lot for me, and in a world of, it's kind of some iffy characters out there, these are really solid people. So I love them, and I really don't need another gallery. I'm working hard enough as it is. I don't need it anymore. Um, um, I'm in a couple of small museums, and maybe MoMA. I'd like to be in MoMA. I'm really happy. I'm really delighted and excited and honored to be at the Olive Center coming up. So that'll be great. That's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you know when a work is finished, or is it ever really finished?
You know when somebody rips it out of your hands that it's finished. When somebody buys it, it's gone. I should tell you this little story, which is kind of interesting. Pierre Bonnard, right? Pierre Bonnard, they had a big retrospective of Pierre Bonnard many, many years ago in at the Louvre of his work in Paris. And one day the guard notices that there's a little old man over by one of the Bonnard paintings, and this little old man is actually painting on the Bonnard painting. It was Bonnard. Bonnard was painting. He said, I just had another idea that I wanted to paint on his side. So you never know. Even when somebody takes it away from you, maybe it's not done. I started a painting in 1997, and I work on paintings continuously and change them and even paint over them. And I started in 1997. I sold it in 2007. So 10 years of, and I'd still be working on it today, except somebody bought it. So you never know.
Perfect. So then the final question is, where can we find your work?
Well, I mentioned the first of all, Google. You can see a lot of stuff on Google. My website, my website's lousy. I haven't kept it up in years, so don't go to that. But Google has a lot of stuff, and my galleries put that stuff on Google, so you can see all the shows that they have done and all that. And then of course the galleries, like I mentioned, Aaron Packer in Chicago and First Street Gallery in New York. You can go to their websites and all that. But it's it's a lot of stuff in the air there. Yeah.
Great.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I forgot to mention. Starting September 17th through October 22nd at the fabulous Olive Art Center in Frankfort, Michigan, I'll be there. A show. It'll be a big show. It's got a lot of stuff. I got a lot of nice stuff coming.
Oh, we're very excited. Very excited to see it.
I am too.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps up our 20 questions, Hank. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us.
Well, I enjoyed it. It was fun. It's always fun talking talking about things like this, it's kind of gets the mind stimulated in a way.
Sure. Yeah, it absolutely does. It does. And the nice thing about these interviews is that since we ask the same questions, you get to kind of get an idea on how different artists see different things. So it's been, from my point of view, it's been great interviewing different people and getting different answers and just kind of exploring a little bit.
It's an education, isn't it? Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It definitely is. It is.
Terrific. I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing. I think this is a great idea.
Oh, good. Well, thank you.
Happy to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely, Hank. And I thank you for doing it.
Okay.